Welcome to the Dynamics Compass podcast, where insights from experts will help Dynamics partners and users navigate their way through the rapidly evolving ecosystem. On this episode, we'll talk about moving from Dynamics Nav to Business Central. I'm your host Rory de Goede, and today we're joined by Chris Ruyeras, Nav and BC expert. He's been in the partner space for the past decade, holding multiple roles. He is the former Dynamics Nav user group chapter lead in Washington. Chris has a passion for sharing knowledge and insights, which is why he's both the creator of his blog page Matalino and his podcast co-host of Dynamics Corner alongside Brett Prendergast. Chris can easily put himself in his customer's shoes, having had a career on the end user side and moved up to become the IT director for different end users prior to moving into consulting, which to me makes Chris the perfect person to discuss the NAV to BC transition and its change management intricacies. Chris, could you add a bit more to your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So not only I came from an end user side, but I've also worked on other ERP prior to, running or coming across
Oh yeah.
Dynamics Navision. So yeah, in the past decade, I've been on the independent consultant at some point, and also on the partner side. So holding multiple hats. Certainly, that's the case when you're an independent consultant, and the partner side. I've helped build multiple practices, including ERP practice, down to Part Platform, BI, and CE or CRM, customer experience, or customer relationship management. So yeah, I've pretty much covered a slew of different areas of the Microsoft stack.
Okay. And how far do you and Microsoft go back then?
So funny story, when I started my career in IT, I was still in high school. I had an opportunity to do an externship or internship for a company. And as soon as I finished uh, high school, and I went straight to work for them and was going to college at the same time. So I've always been in
That's great.
IT. So it's I've been up forever, and that's included all the Microsoft products.
Hmm. That's okay. That's really cool. So you should know your stuff then. What we're going to talk about today.
I hope so.
Um, yeah, with like we were both at Summit as well recently. There's BC is obviously a big item right now for Microsoft. There seems to be a really big push. But I really wanted to ask you, coming from your background, how would you describe the appetite for Business Central amongst the NAV customers?
So what's interesting, it's kind of a natural progression for organizations that are running Nav, and it's an easy transition for them to go to Business Central. A lot of the functionalities are very, very similar. Clearly, there's a lot more new features in the way you handle upgrades in the future and things like that. From what's interesting to me, though, is one of my sessions at Summit, us being at Summit, is that 80% of my attendees were coming from a different ERP system. In this case, it was GP.
Okay.
For a lot of the customers I dealt with in Nav, they're really trying to figure out some functionality that would get them excited to really push the organization to make that investment into Business Central. So there is a huge appetite, regardless if you're from GP or Nav. There's certainly a lot of people really interested in what Business Central can do for them,
Hmm.
especially with new features are coming out on a consistent basis.
Yeah. What would you say are the main reasons for moving to Business Central?
One of the main reasons is typically the support with Nav, and with the digital space of things moving quicker, utilizing some of the um, low code, no code functionalities and new features, and of course Copilot.
Yeah.
It gets them pretty excited where they can see where they can be a little bit more efficient on automating a lot of the things and it's easier, it's much more accessible
Hmm.
to be able to utilize that within your organization. Back in the day with Nav, for example, my experience, you're kind of dependent on your partners to, what do they offer? And in this case, Business Central, you have so many options to choose from that allows for any size organization to be able to quickly adapt to it.
Okay. Flipping that coin then, uh, what are the main reasons for staying on Nav and not making the switch
um,
that you've seen
Probably
from customers?
typically budgetary, and then number two, kind of a big change, right? It's a big investment, especially if you're an end user or client that's using Nav for years and years. Because remember, back in the day with Nav, it's usually about a couple of years before you get a new upgrade, right? So from
Yeah.
Nav 2009, you got 2013, and then 2015, 16, and so forth. Now, when you're upgrading, you really, that's a big investment. And so usually that's the uh, hold up.
Hmm.
And so in that case, a lot of the environments may be highly modified. So there's also that to consider. Of course, historical data. It can get pretty overwhelming. In many cases, I do at that point I would recommend probably a reimplementation or a brand new implementation. You want to consider Nav to Business Central not as a migration, in a sense, maybe looking at it from a new implementation, being able to start not start all over, but being able to adjust processes that makes more sense and much more efficient.
What I was just gonna ask you indeed, if you would consider the move from Nav to BC um, a mere migration, but you're already starting to talk about a re-implementation just due to the complexity. Is that always the case?
It's not always the case. There are some organizations I've done a lot of work with where they're coming from NAP 2016. They just did a straight migration. It was their process were very simple. They were very efficient, but they were able to utilize new features. So it's not always the case. The more complex ones, I would really consider or recommend that maybe it is time to just do a brand new implementation. Here's why. Some of the things that maybe was customized in Nav is now a standard feature in Business Central. So a lot of people don't realize, especially if you're maybe one of your employees just join your organization, so they go their day-to-day process, right? They're not going to know if that field was customized or if their process was customized from the standard behavior of Nav.
Yeah.
So you don't always want to carry that over because first of all, that's a technical debt that you have to maintain because it has to be an extension. And then number two, you want to make sure that there isn't something that's already out of the box functionality, which can save you from having to maintain that in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for highlighting that. Um, go, Going back a little bit to that decision making or the options that the managers need to consider. If because Business Central is built on the same technology as Nav, right? At least
In a
that's what I
sense, yeah,
understood.
a lot of the modules and functionalities, that is correct. So the core of it primarily come from Nav, yes.
Does that make Business Central the no-brainer option then when they make a decision to move away from Nav?
I'm going to be a little bit biased. I would say yes, because I implement Business Central. So yes, it's naturally it's a no-brainer to go to Business Central. But I have worked with organizations where they, because due to their change of the business and their growth, they, also an opportunity for them to look at maybe another ERP. And but that's very rare in my case. Business Central is a natural progression from Nav to Business Central, but it really comes down to the organization's requirements. And if they
Yeah.
have some very unique requirements where Business Central really cannot be that solution for them, and I'm okay with that. But at the end of the day, it's very rare that uh, or at least the
Yeah.
ones I've dealt with, don't want to go to Business Central because of just this new amazing uh, Business Central application with new features and being able to extend it further in the entire ecosystem of Microsoft, it is a no-brainer in this case.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is it fair to assume that if they were to choose a different technology, it would make the migration implementation more complex?
Um, yes and no, and here's a fun thing, right? That's why I mentioned earlier about, when you're moving to Business Central, consider it as a brand new implementation, because if they also looking at other ERP systems,
Yeah.
more likely they're gonna have to consider that as a brand new implementation. So why not
Yes.
have the effort to do that in Business Central? And the biggest benefit of that is a lot of your users are probably going to be comfortable already. So the um, the entrance for adopting into Business Central, it's a lot easier, right?
Mhm.
Because then it's very similar in terms of the process of maybe some posting or even navigation within Business Central.
Yeah. So have you seen organizations that, because you mentioned you have to look at your requirements, which solution fits best to your needs. Have you seen companies coming to a different solution as the best, as the most fit for purpose, but because it's less complex to move to BC and the adoption to BC might be less complex, that they still choose BC over the one that matched more requirements?
Let me see if I understand. Let me reiterate if I understand your question. If they're coming
Yeah.
from another ERP solution and they're looking at Business Central, are they more inclined to go with Business Central because it's less complex?
No, if they're on Navision or on Nav, but
Okay,
actually not
okay.
a non-Microsoft technology is actually matching the requirements more, but they're still choosing Business Central because it's less complex to move to.
Oh, yeah, that is common. So for example, that kind of leads into the app source space. So a lot of times you may not identify that at the very beginning, and that's why discovery is very important in having these conversation, as well as clients being able to also go through that exercise internally to
Yeah.
identify the requirements and what is really needed for the company. Um, so no, I think if people, if you do go with Business Central, not only it's less complex, but there is a growing app source. So whatever problem they're trying to solve,
Hmm.
whatever um, add-on they may need to replace, there's more likely an option within App Source
Yeah.
or Power Automate or Power Platform or a customization. So a lot of times maybe Business Central will get you there 80%. And then that
Mhm.
20% is very unique to your business. In many cases, that 20% could be fulfilled by all the things that I just mentioned, right? So App
Yeah.
Source, Power Platform, and customization.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for understanding my my question as well. Sometimes I'm trying to piece the things in my brain together and trying to
No,
make
no,
someone else
no
understand what's
problem.
going on up there.
No problem.
Different approach, or from the customer. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What do you think of that?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. So I'm trying to find a way to have um analogy here. So I'll use my experience. So my house, right? Um, it's built in the 90s, early 90s, and I have a deck.
Yes.
Okay. It's functional. It works. I can
Yes.
stand on it. It works perfectly fine. Eventually, it's going to need to be replaced. It works for now.
Yeah.
You can get me there, but the railing's gonna start to fall off, and maybe I can band-aid a little bit of that. But the foundation or the base of that deck will eventually need to be replaced. It's much more expensive for me if I just replace small pieces um,
Mhm.
along the way. So for me, it's much better for me to go ahead and just invest in replacing that, not only for the safety of people being out on the deck for me, uh, yeah, it's not broken for sure.
Yeah.
It's still functional,
Yeah.
but I will need to eventually replace it. And then replacing it by piece is not going to make a lot of sense because the foundation of it, I can fix the top level, but
Yeah.
the foundation of it is no longer supported, or maybe it's no longer to code, right?
Yes.
So think of it that way. Hopefully that analogy makes a whole lot of sense. But about the if it broke, don't fix it. You have to plan for that future. So
Yeah.
um,
I
that's what I think about those things when someone tells me that.
Yeah. Nah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that analogy. I normally t tend to go towards cars. Like
Yeah,
you could drive an old car, but eventually it will break down. It will need new parts. But the older the car is, the harder it is to get the parts, the harder it is to get someone who still knows how that old car is put together. It's easier to go towards the newer technologies because it's easier to get parts, easier to find people to fix it.
that's
Less
a good
chance for it to
analogy as
broke down.
well. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a new analogy as well.
So you're a big fan of companies choosing for Business Central and not staying on Nav.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I am biased to go into Business Central. It's because it's what I do, and I love the product very much. And coming from Nav, I mean, I know having to maintain Nav for sure.
Yeah.
Even if you're not coming from Nav, you're coming from another ERP system, Business Central is a great solution to really consider when you're looking for a new application.
Yeah. You just said it. You love the system so much. Why do you love it so much?
Oh man, I could go on this forever. First of all, from the personal aspect, not only the community itself, but the application from even from Nav all the way to Business Central, it allowed me to have a career in this space. And not only I love the Business Central application, but I love the community behind it. And 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 I remember early day, I'll share a little bit of story here of my path to career in the early days, trying to find documentation and getting into Nav was very difficult. Typically, you'd have to, partner with somebody, kind of, mentor you. Now it's a lot easier, right? And
Yeah.
so looking at my career, I want to give back and building my career. The community also helped me as well. And so I got to meet a lot of people and the people behind Business Central and Nav, not only from a client side, but also the Microsoft side. It helped me raise my family, right? Like let's look at it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
It allowed me to do more things and fun things to build my career. So that's why I love the product very much and the people uh, behind it. So that's kind of a selfish way that it's for me. In terms of the product itself as a whole, it really gives an option for all different sizes of the clients or company
Yeah.
that is easier to get into and also allows flexible enough for me to grow as a company. That means I can use Power Platform, I can use the M365 space, and all of that talking to each other. So as a organization, as a company that uses Business Central, and you're already using Microsoft ecosystem, for a small company or small business, that's a big deal because then they all talk to each other, right? It's fully integrated, and it makes it easy for companies to benefit from that
Yeah.
and not have to do like middleware and trying to do workarounds to do that. But it's all built in.
Yeah. This might be a little bit off topic, but I have heard big advantage of BC is that it's very scalable. Is it closing the gap or nearing to closing the gap with FNO or FSCM? Good.
Yes,
I
yeah,
don't
okay,
often.
so I will speak on my experience. I've worked with end users, clients where they are in finance
Yeah.
or FNO or FNSCM, and where they identified that, hey, for the size of our organization, it's maybe a little too much.
Hmm.
Um, I think Business Central would be a good fit. Clearly we did a full discovery to make sure that the decision that they're making is the right decision And in many cases, in a lot of cases, we identified the yeah, Business Central will do what they're trying to do, and it also allows them the flexibility for growth as well.
Yeah.
But also goes the other way around, right? I've seen organization coming from Nav, maybe not so much in BC, but from Nav, they outgrew it and went to AX at that time, or F&O at that time. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks for that. I was just as you were talking, I was just wondering that with what a lot of other people have told me about BC and all the potential that it has. Like, oh, that that doesn't seem too much. I know they're two completely different products, but yeah, maybe the gap is starting to fade a bit between the two. Therefore, more opportunities as well for BC.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the common things for people that are going into Business Central, and they choose to do Business Central, is the integration with the other D365 applications. So, for example, the D365 for sales, and as well as the field service, which is now have the ability to integrate between BC and those two applications. So
Okay.
it's certainly making it easier for organizations to like, hey, I'll go with Business Central, and guess what? I still need field service, or you may still need a CRM.
Yeah.
You can do that with the integration.
Okay. Ah, I did not know that. But that explains why it's such a um, convincing solution to go to if you've got all these other options as well, and you won't
Yeah,
miss out on the options that CE would offer, for example.
right. Exactly.
All right. And then you've been in the partner space for over a decade. How many roughly just how many implementations have you done?
Oh, I stopped counting, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Um, and there's also, for example, like there's an end-to-end implementation, like directly from beginning, from Nav or other ERP to Business Central go live.
Yeah.
Honestly, I had stopped counting. And there's also a smaller implementation, meaning, just finance, or maybe a specific module within Central. So that's a
Yeah.
tough question to answer, because I really stopped counting. And on top of that, my role has shifted quite a bit. But man,
Yeah.
I really miss the hands-on. So funny enough, even though my role is in the executive side, or vice president side currently, I still I still ask my team, hey, put me in, coach.
Yeah.
I'll be a functional consultant, so I do get still involved in that.
Yeah.
So I still get excited. Like I said, I love the product and what it can do.
Yeah.
And so when I do get it involved in that, I typically don't introduce myself with that title. I usually
Hmm.
just say I'm a colleague and another contributor to the project.
Yeah. Very humble. The reason I asked the question as well is because I actually was keen to explore delivery models a little bit with you. And okay, you haven't given me a number, but there's enough there to know that you've done a lot of implementations and a lot of projects to have seen what works and what doesn't work, at least on a higher level. So I wanted to ask you. What model have you seen has a more chance of a successful implementation in terms of who does the delivery? Um, and if, for example, is that the model where everything is done by a partner, or
Hmm.
everything is done in-house, or it's a blend with partner contractors in-house, or what have you seen is a
Okay.
successful way?
I get what you're saying. When you said model, I thought about like, okay, what kind of project management style?
Yeah, sorry,
Uh,
sorry.
right. No, it's all good. So it has to be, I look at it as a partnership, right?
Yeah,
It's going to require an effort on both parties. And so I actually had one of my sessions on this during Summit, was how to prepare uh, your organization to start a business central project,
Hmm.
and also how do you communicate with your partners when you do start that project. So it is a hybrid or a combination of both. One of the things that you need to consider when you're working with a partner, your partner, you look at the partners, the people that will execute, right, the implementation of your business central project.
Yeah.
The ownership really needs to come from you, the client that's deciding to do Business Central, because
Hmm.
you have to maintain not only from your business aspect, but also beyond, right? How do you continue to utilize Business Central way after your Business Central project? You may have some team members that are part of the project may have moved on, right? So you cannot rely on that. You have to rely in building that structure within your organization. So, for example, if you're running a Business Central project, uh, your partner will have a PM or an implementer associate assigned to you, but you internally as a client, you should have an internal project coordinator or lead or project manager that owns that project. You also want to make sure that you have an internal executive sponsor, right? The decision maker of, that yes, we should sign that change order or not sign that change order.
Hmm.
So you should have that built in. And of course, change management, you have to make sure your team members are aware of the change and why you're going into Business Central. So to have a successful Business Central implementation, it's really a combination. So your partner will give you the best practice or better practice based upon your business requirement, but you still own that at the end of the day.
Okay. Okay. So there's not much in that sense. As long as the partnership is there, it doesn't matter if well, probably I'll wait till you give the answer. If it's all with one organization, one partner, or that there's contractors involved, or there's done things done in-house, as long as it's clear who's responsible for what and everyone's on the same page, that will lead to success.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, some partners, do not, I would say, do not care in a sense, but are open. If you prefer to have somebody that's a contractor, a third party contractor, a lot of partners are open to that as long as you're having that effective communication and knowing exactly who's doing what.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter at that point, as long as that role, whether it's a contractor or your partner's doing it for you, have a clear understanding of the end goal, a clear understanding of the functionality that they're responsible for or meeting a requirement. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been in projects where we have, possibly, I think like 4 or 5 vendors that
Yeah.
we all had to communicate, and that's okay, right? As long as you have that clear communication and everybody knows, where is your seat within the bus.
Yes. Yes. Because I can imagine that if you stick with one partner, obviously I'm unbiased here, but if you stick with one partner, um, you're working with a team that's very used to each other. Like I'll use an analogy. I used to play futsal with my buddies when I was still well, I'm 37, but a couple of years ago, and then we were up against these guys that were close to their 50s, but they'd been playing futsal together for the past 15 years, and we thought, oh, we'll take them, but they worked really well together, and I imagine, and we didn't stand a chance. And imagine it could be the same you w working with a partner, with a Microsoft partner that where the team is very used to working with each other and communicating with each other, that there's just more synchrony. Is that a word?
Yeah, there is a benefit of having that cohesive team that knows the role in a project for sure, right? It's
Yeah.
that it becomes muscle memory. Like I know where I'm responsible and what I'm responsible for. So yes, absolutely, there's a big benefit of that. There are some partners out there. Partner where I'm at, we consider ourselves one hand to hold. And so it's a lot easier for organizations to just not have to worry about maybe too many different vendors. Again, that's based on business requirement
Yeah.
where they just rely on us to say, I need this. Well, we have someone for that, right? Instead of the client having to worry about finding someone to meet that requirement. And you can even collaborate and say, hey, that partner may not have that person, but they can help you find that person as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I agree with you. I played lacrosse for a long time,
Yeah.
and certainly when we are in sync, it's all muscle memory. I know my teammate's going to be right over there, right when I pass. I know
It's
he's
gonna
going to
be
be right over there, right?
yeah.
Versus if it's someone new, sometimes it may be difficult to have to call out a play and say, whatever play you want to call, and then for them to know like they got to be right there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I get it. It's both ways. Again, it depends on the requirements,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Um, when it comes to pitfalls, when BC now, I'm not asking you like, did any of your projects go wrong and was it your fault? But what have you seen what are typically the 2 to 3 pitfalls why
Yeah.
BC implementations could fail?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've seen them, but we've been able to. I've been lucky that I've had clients that truly understand the need and be able to react in situations like that. But we do try to our very best to prevent that. One is typically not going into organization change management and all that stuff. One is typically time. Um, we understand that your subject matter experts could they also have day-to-day job, right?
Yes.
So for them to spend time into this new implementation can be very difficult where they say, I don't have time to test. So that's number two is testing, where they don't have enough time to test a functionality in Business Central. So when they go live, they will say, I don't remember going through this, or, oh, did we think about doing this? That's an entire missed opportunity, which could have been prevented. And then the last one is you typically around data migration. So bad data, right? Your analogy about buying a car, your car needs to be replaced. The
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is take your garbage in your car, or maybe you love that bucket seat and you want to put it on a Ferrari, right? Why
Yeah.
would you want to do that? Nothing against my, Honda Civic. I had one. I don't want my Honda Civic chair into my, I don't know, Tesla, for example, right?
Yeah.
Tesla is more comfortable,
Yeah.
right? So that or Ferrari. So yeah, you know what I mean? Like you have to make sure your data is clean. So who is more knowledgeable about your data? You, a client, knows your data better than your partner, that better than a consultant. A consultant will tell you what data should go to where in the
Yeah.
field within Business Central, but they're not going to know what did you use this data for unless you do the discovery. But
So do most end users or customers have the know-how on cleaning their data, or they need some hand holding there no normally?
so that's when you have internal champion sponsors, executive sponsors, subject matter experts. A supervisor is typically not typically, not always the subject matter experts. Typically, someone that does this task on a daily basis. um, they have to be involved in that conversation. Now, you can have a partner or consultant walk you through the process where they can ask you those questions. Say, is this still relevant? When you are moving some data over, for example, your description may be um, wonky, right? You may have some colors in your description. Well, a functional consultant will tell you, hey, I understand you still need that, but let's move that into maybe an attribute within Business Central, or maybe a variant within Business Central. So the client may not know that, but
Yeah.
a consultant will tell you otherwise, but you still own that. It's like, do you really need that color in the description? You probably don't. Let's have consistency, proper formatting, right? So that would be a good combination of how you can make it work.
Okay. Right. Last one, Chris. When when you do implement Business Central, obviously everyone's going through the changes. Is there such a thing as a fail-proof change management to ensure full user adoption?
That is a tough question, right? There's different ways to approach change management, and I'd love to hear from others as well. And I'm just going off by my experience in IT space. Uh, you know, for quite some time here, almost 2 decades in the IT space, and I will tell you, so far I have not found a fail-proof change management. You can certainly minimize the risk of um, failed change management or implementation, as long as you plan for that and part of the risk and mitigation.
Hmm.
So you could, in a sense, have fail proof by putting an action to prevent that or minimize it. I think you can minimize it, but not necessarily fail proof. And the reason why I say that is especially when you have a human aspect with the process, it's
Yeah.
those are the things you can't really control. Um, and so I can't say 100% that any change management approach is fail proof. Um, and again, that's from my experience. In many cases, I've had change management where it just, it did no issues, right?
Yeah.
Smooth implementation.
Yeah.
But and I could take the same approach on another project, and you may hit some bumps in the road during implementation, and not necessarily completely kill the project, but it creates additional time for you to make it up, because now you have to react to that, or mitigate a blocker along the way.
Yeah. Does it often come down to the type of personalities you have to deal with, or is it something completely different?
Um, I think some of that comes into play with the personality. I think to have somebody that either your change manager, a leader, someone that owns that area, will have to have a very good, not just that person, by the way, everybody in the group,
Yeah.
to be able to understand everybody's weakness and strengths, right? So, because you have to understand ways to communicate to other different people. I think that becomes very important when it comes to different personalities. Because yes, I've dealt with a lot of different personalities in all the implementations I've ever done.
Yeah.
Um, and you do have to kind of read the room, right? And I think we had a conversation with Christian as well, of how do you manage that when you are fully remote, right?
Yeah.
You can't, you only know them when the camera's on. But when you're in office setting, it's a lot easier. You can see that, you can sense that, you can see their body language
Hmm.
and how they sit down. Those are the things that you typically read the room.
Yeah.
And but you can't really do that
On the video.
on a video and a digital. So there's a lot of shift uh, ways to possibly get around that. But yeah, you have to manage that different personalities. It's part of the game. It's part of the space you have to
Yeah.
deal with.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to phrase this correctly. I've got the question in my head, but don't know if I have the right words to explain it easily. Um, still in the change management, whoever's the internal leader that's making the decision for Business Central, can that be a factor in whether the change management will work or not, or the implementation will be a success in terms of user adoption? Like if the drive comes from the, I don't know, CIO, it has this impact, but if it comes from the top dog, the CEO, then normally user adoption is a lot better, or, or any other role in the organization.
That depends on your organization's culture. So that's
Okay.
hard. That's also hard to tell. So as a consultant or somebody that's ever run a project in Business Central, even if I'm on site, um, it doesn't matter who it's coming from. Um, if the culture is not there to help champion or um,
Okay.
what that may be, it can be very difficult. So even if it's coming from CEO or CIO, that really depends on the culture. Now, primarily, it is best to have a president or a CEO to be able to drive that message, because that role, the role, the CEO role or president's role is to um, create that vision of where this company is going, and
Yeah.
they have to be able to champion that, and why are we doing this. So it's much better to for it to come from there versus maybe a department supervisor.
Hmm.
There's certainly a lot of weight in there for sure.
Yeah.
So typically you want that person to be able to drive that, because that's where you go look up to those people. It's like, where's this company going, where
Yeah.
am I going to be? So for that to come from the top, much
Then
better. Yeah.
then but you still have to get the culture right. If the culture isn't there, or if you have a culture where anyone can challenge the president, then that might still be a hard thing for your user adoption.
Exactly, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but a lot of it's something that brought up another conversation where people on the floor that's doing the work, they typically look for their supervisors for guidance, not the CEO, as well. So what that means is if your culture
Hmm.
is it's not all fun and fun and love and game, and you have a supervisor that really is not a fan
Yeah.
uh, of
Then the
anybody up
team
top,
won't be either.
it's going to be a problem, right? So
Yeah.
again, like I said, it doesn't really matter who is coming from if the culture is not really structured that way.
Yeah.
So um, I think
Th-
that's very, very important that people tend to forget. Like your company as a whole, do you have that culture of change, right?
yeah. Which that is a big topic in itself already. And I'd actually love to explore it more, but I've got no questions prepared on this.
No,
Um,
no. Just to elaborate a little bit, because I mentioned this I did a short on our Dynamics Corner podcast,
yeah.
where it's embedded in us, right? In as a hunters and gatherers, I think I mentioned this in the village, where you see changes in the bushes, you fight or flight instinct comes into play, right? It triggers
Hmm.
that. So as a village, you may have your chief or whatever, right? And say, hey, we are going to jump into another island, right? And we're going to explore the world outside of our boundaries of safety. But if you have somebody in the village that spreads fear,
Hmm.
right? Nobody's going to believe that the chief, that captain, that we're going to go out, and they don't want, then those people don't want to volunteer because there's fear among that. And those people could be, I don't know, somebody within your village. But if it's a culture's entire village that you champion the change, that there's an importance of why we need to move and be seafarers and go into other islands, much easier to do that, because then everybody supports and everybody comes to have a position
Yes.
to make that change.
Yeah. This is yeah, this is very very eye-opening. I never when someone would have asked me what would be an important criteria for a successful implementation and user adoption, culture wouldn't have been one of the first things to think of for me. So I've definitely learned a lot on this conversation. I hope the people that have watched this are watching this as well. Um, and it also sounds like there's a lot more that I could ask you. So I'll probably ask you back one day once I've got a lot more to think through. I had the chance to think it through, but it was great having you, Chris, and getting all your insights. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm looking forward to further conversation. I think it's an important thing to discuss, especially with Business Central, where Business Central is going. I think everyone's going to love that product, but you want to make sure that you prepare yourself for success. So
Yeah,
thanks for having me, Rory.
yeah, all good. Cheers, Chris.
All right, cheers.
Thanks for watching this episode on the Dynamics Compass podcast. We decided to launch this podcast after having spoken to a lot of people in the community who seem to be looking for answers to the same questions. So then we decided, why don't we find experts in the market that have the answers, interview them, and then release that information for free to help everyone progress their Microsoft Dynamics journey. So we hope that you found this video very informative and helpful for you to continue your journey and keep moving forward. If you would like to hear about any other topics, please write to me on LinkedIn, email me, rory@thegoodtalent.co, and we'd be happy to have a look. We'll look for the experts that have the answers. We'll interview them, and it will be freely available to you. Again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your support as well, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.